Leicester City 2, Chelsea 0. Chelsea is blue, but is Frank Lampard still the man? That is the question. We are the upper tier, brought to you by the Dynamo Podcast Network. And tonight I'm joined by my main man, Ian Kelly, Chelsea fan. Lampard and blue true and true. But we need to discuss the elephant in the room, let's say. Looking at it tonight, Ian, before we dive into Lampard and his management, let's talk about the team setup, the selection players, the match itself. For me, I always say it, to me, Giroud was always a big loss if he's not there. I really think he's the main man without a shadow of a doubt. I don't know why the selection of Tammy Abraham over Werner happens. I don't know why he's still persistent when he does bring Werner on, that he puts him in out on the left and not up the middle. I don't know what Kurt Zouma was doing sitting on the bench and Rudiger in the side. But these are on, you elaborate more than me. I mean, you're a Chelsea fan. These are just things I see from the outside.
Yeah, I mean, some Chelsea fans got to be up their bonnet because, like, Rudiger done a half-decent job against Fulham. But let's be honest, it's Fulham. And no disrespect to Fulham, I know they got a draw against Tottenham the other week. But, like, it was a relatively easy day at the office. I mean, it should be an easy day at the office when you're playing alongside Thiago Silva, who looks like he's still in his prime, to be honest with you. I actually feel sorry for Thiago Silva at this moment of time, coming to a club where he thought he's going to be fighting for titles. Reece James was back in the side, probably put in prematurely. I still would have waited till next week, to be honest with you. Fair enough, though. You can't really give him any shit for that. Mateo Kovacic, Mason Mount, he went back to the 4-2-3-1 kind of formation, and then he fluctuated, and then had Kai Havertz just behind Tammy Abraham. I mean, Tammy Abraham, he's like a fish out of water. Let's be fair. Like, I know he's got a couple of goals this year, but the ball just bounces off him. And, he started Callum, brought Havertz off after 67 minutes, brought Werner on to play him where? On the wing after 67 minutes, as usual. A player who scored 30-plus goals, I think, over his last couple of seasons in Germany. And Germany isn't much of a step down from the Premier League. Let's be real. People have always lauded over German defenses, and it's still that way. Germans still set up defensively and tactically, I think, as good as anybody in the world. For Christ's sake, who's the Champions League winners of last year? Do you know what I mean? Bayern Munich. They do play against good teams in that league. It's not PSG in France. Do you know what I mean? I really think just wrong. Tammy Abraham should be the third striker on the team sheet at this moment in time behind Giroud or Werner. But let's be real. After Werner's misses and all that against Fulham, it's all well and good Lampard coming out and hugging him after the game and saying, like, oh, we need to get his confidence back. Not going to get his confidence back sitting on the bench and then coming on as a sub to play on the wing. There's just... I think Lampard is playing FIFA at the moment and knew that the club had a budget of 200+ million this year and went, oh, Kai Havertz, everyone wants him. I'm Frank Lampard. I can get him into the club, no problem. Timo Werner, he's available. Liverpool want him. I can get him into the club, no problem, because of my reputation. But there was no plan. And I think now, halfway through the season, we're seeing that. There is no plan. Tactically, positionally. It's, Anyway, next question. Sorry, but just to answer that, I mean, Rudiger, there's a great question. What has Kurt Zouma done so wrong now to be dropped for 2 games in a row? Can anyone answer me that, please? I have no answer.
No. I suppose the last time we spoke about Chelsea, we did speak about the fact that, like, you've basically a whole new back five there that are trying to bed in and trying to, and it takes time. And the thing about it is, I suppose looking at it, did he try and bring in too many players in the one time because he was catching up because of the ban? Would it be better if he had just brought in maybe a Chilwell and a Werner and maybe not a Havertz, and maybe he backed off a little bit instead of going, okay, I missed out on a couple of windows here with the ban, so I'm just going to bring in, like, he brought in so many players, and then on top
I actually disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. And it's not to be controversial to disregard your point, because I see your point and I see where you're coming from. Havertz was well needed. We needed that type of dynamic midfielder that can do what Lampard and Ballack used to do: get up and down the pitch and get in and score goals. Because as good as Mason Mount is, he can't do it all on his own. And don't forget, last year Mason Mount could be out on either side of the wing. He could be playing defensive midfielder or he could be playing advanced midfield. You know what I mean? He can't do it all on his own. And as much as Lampard loves Mount, and I understand he's his boy, and I'm behind that, I love Mount. I think he's absolutely quality. He's the only player on that team that looks like he's given 110%. We mentioned on the previous show, Blue Meets Red, Kovacic shouldn't be in this side at all. Yeah, he's a dynamic midfielder. He can run and he can go at players. But look, as a central midfielder, you want one of two things. You want defensive solidity. You want either that alone, so you get that in Kante, right? Or you want assists and goals, or one of the other. Just something. Not the odd assist. I mean, having one assist in a year. Don't forget, this player went, 3 or 4 years without a goal. And now I'm starting to see why. Last year, he was playing because he got that new, he got that new contract or whatever. And it's like this year, he's kind of went, I'll play when I want to. Do you know what I mean? So I'd be putting him, definitely I'd be considering him for a possible transfer at the end of the summer. Pulisic, don't forget, is only coming back from major injuries, and especially at that young age, you really want to pamper him. That's a Michael Owen situation right there. You really want to be pampering him because he's still only a kid. Hudson-Odoi looks like he's got a bit about him, but always Hudson-Odoi is the one to come off. It's like he has favourites to bring on and favourites to come off, but yet the others just stay on the pitch regardless of how their performance is. Only 2 subs used tonight. Is that good enough when you're trailing 2-0 behind? Like, is there an excuse for not using all 3 subs when you've got Giroud on the bench, who has literally delivered the goods when he's come on every time? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Was Giroud on the bench tonight? I don't think he was.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't on the bench.
Because I assume if he's there, for me, he's a starter straight away, to be honest.
Well, I'll tell you what, he wasn't on the bench tonight, but you know who was on the bench? So Ziyech and Werner on the bench, and Billy Gilmore's on the bench. Billy Gilmore should have come on for Kovacic, and Timo Werner should have come on for Tammy Abraham.
Yeah.
This love-in that people have, like, unless you play for the Chelsea youth team at 8 years old, then you're not really Chelsea. That's a load of bollocks as well, because we're living in fantasy land now. Because we haven't had that for so long, now people are running wild with that story. Do you know what I mean? Billy Gilmore has performed time after time. Don't forget last year, Billy Gilmore put Liverpool's main midfield to the test. We can all remember that at 17 years of age. I remember you calling me going, who the fuck is that small young fella? Yeah. Because I think even Roy Keane was raving about him, wasn't he? He goes, Roy Keane said, doesn't matter if he's 17, he needs to be in that team every week. He's not getting a look in. Kovacic and Jorginho get a look in over him now all the time. I don't know, but that's enough about the team selection. I know you have questions to ask, and I'm happy to answer them.
Absolutely. Well, we've spoke before about. Before we go any further, I suppose we should say hats off to Brendan Rodgers and Leicester. I mean, they came with a game plan, and they play looking at their formation there. It's unbelievable. They kind of play with they nearly have 1 midfielder and 5 up front, if you think about it. It's just, they're all heavy attacking players. Vardy just stays up there on his own, kind of as a pest, just to annoy that front line. And then you have the boys running from deep ball: Brighton, Tielemans, Harvey Barnes,
and then Ndidi is just like a younger Kante, isn't he?
Yeah, he's that kind of anchor. He's that Fabinho type player, isn't he? He just sits there and anything on the counter, he breaks up. But they're literally playing with nearly with a 4-1-5. When you think about it, you know what I mean? And hats off to Rodgers, what he's doing there, Leicester. They're playing great football. And
don't forget, you asked me this a long time ago before this podcast was set up. You asked me before Lampard came in who would be my next manager.
Yeah.
And I said to you, Brendan Rodgers.
Yeah, it was a good shout. Yeah,
Brendan Rodgers would have been the perfect manager to come in and set that team up. Now, look, that's all hindsight, and I'm glad Lampard did come in, and he had a great year last year. I don't want to be I'm not on the anti-Lampard train either before anybody starts getting too excited with this. But yeah, hats off to Leicester tonight. But look, Chelsea were there for the taking. They know teams have figured Chelsea out because there's nothing to figure out because there's no game plan.
Yeah. But going back to Lampard, I mean, a number of times this season we've questioned tactics and substitutions and game plans. And as you said, there
Too
doesn't
many
seem to be a
times.
game plan there. We've spoke already where we talk about that he's like he's trying to keep a bunch of players happy instead of playing a formation, finding a formula and sticking with it. And then you only change it if you get an injury or a suspension, or, if a game isn't going your way, you might want to change it up with a sub or something like that. But he seems very erratic in the way he does things and all. And like it's like he doesn't know what his best 11 is whatsoever. And even when he does know his best 11, he doesn't know his best 11 in their best positions.
Like, I'm asking myself at the moment, is Lampard a coach or is he a manager? I'm asking which is, because, and you understand when I ask that question to myself,
Yeah.
a lot of people in modern football don't get that. Alex Ferguson was a manager and then had coaches do all the tactic stuff, right? And in the modern day, you've seen you've seen people come in as either head coach or manager. So I'm wondering with Lampard I'm wondering with Lampard, is it a case that is he either or at the moment?
It's like is he
You know,
still
he
it's like is he still one of the boys?
like he's still a manager in the sense
Yeah.
that he keeps lads happy and lads love him. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, because he is a nice guy. Lampard is a nice guy, but even when you look at him on the touchline, I don't see him. We saw him obviously putting Klopp in his place last year, and you were like, right. And even as a Liverpool fan, you were saying, all right, I don't mind that. There's a bit about that, because even Klopp said, that's all right. That's just a bit of passion. That's what you want to see, right? And then they go and they have their glass of wine after the match, and it's all good. They shake hands and go, bit of banter or whatever. Do you know what I mean? But this season, I'm like, he looks lost. He looks sad. He looks sad,
Well, you
like
see,
on the pitch. And there's a part of me that just wants to give him a fucking hug and say, Lamp, you're a legend. You know what I mean?
yeah, you see, you look at last year as well. Last year, there
There
wasn't
was no
there
pressure.
was
No pressure.
no pressure on him, and the team was performing, and he was playing with what he had to play with. I mean, there wasn't huge decisions to be made last year on selection because he was hampered in terms of the squad he had. So, like, the team practically picked itself, went out there, performed, got you to a top four, got you into the Champions League.
Yeah.
And in fairness to Lampard this year, you've performed well in Europe. You know what I mean? You've played some really nice football in Europe
Here's
at
a
times.
stat. Here's a stat for you. The only top team that we've beaten this year, top team, is Rennes. And are they even a top team?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, this is why we go back just before anyone tries to, and please do comment away and kind of pick apart whatever we're saying. But this is what I mean by, is Lampard a coach or a manager, or is he neither? And the reason I asked that question to myself is that, right, Real Madrid would have killed to have Kai Havertz in their team this year, in their squad. Liverpool would have done the same. Man City would have done the same. Anyone would have done the same, but he was nailed on to go to Chelsea. So everyone just went, all right, well, that looks like it's happening. So they got their business done earlier. And that goes to Marina Granitskaya for being probably the best negotiator in the game, arguably, right? So that's grand. You've got your FIFA player there, if you will, the up and comer for the future, but also a player that's been performing in the Bundesliga and, in Europe. Then you get Timo Werner in, who is a proven goal scorer. He showed it in the Champions League last year, even against Tottenham. Destroyed Tottenham, actually, all across the line. He was playing left, right, centre. But it goes back to when Chelsea signed Fernando Torres. You had a manager that didn't know what to do with him, right? You had Rafa Benitez that knew exactly what to do with a Torres. You play the ball to him and you play it over the top when you can, and you play to his strengths. You don't ask him to come in and fit the Didier Drogba role. And it's the same now with Timo Werner. You don't ask him to come in and fit to your tactics, that you're so stubborn that you don't change your tactics around the players that you brought in. So what you said is correct. To go back to your point, yes, last year we played absolutely fantastic, and he did exactly what he needed to do with that group of players. Now he's brought in the dozen players, the diamond dozen players. Chilwell has performed. Thiago Silva has performed without a shadow of a doubt. Kai Havertz has shown it in spurts. I said last week, we can't really judge Kai Havertz till next season to give him a full season as well, because again, he's only turned 21. Do you know what I mean? Timo Werner's only 24 as well. So again, like he's still a year younger than when Liverpool signed Torres. Like, do you know what I mean? So these are players that still you can give them the benefit of the doubt. You don't just give up on them like you give up on Morata, because in fairness, Morata was a hack. Let's be real. He scores 12 goals a season with any team he's in. So I think that was just a wrong choice of striker. But Lampard brought these guys in. So your Havertz and your your Havertz and your Timo Werner and your Hakim Ziyech. Now it's up to you to show your coaching ability, to show how you're going to mold these players into what you want them to be and how they fit in. At the start,
I think the issue really is, I know where you're coming from, but I think the issue is there's a lot of youth there, and that youth still needs a certain sprinkling of experience to be on that pitch in those moments. I've often said to you, I'd love to
let's answer that then. Well, let's answer that. Edouard Mendy was brought in to fix the goal score. He's 28, right? Thiago Silva, 36. Kurt Zouma, 24. Reece James, in fairness, young, 21. Ben Chilwell, 21, 22. Oh, sorry, I think Reece James is only 19 or 20, isn't he? Yeah. Ben Chilwell, 21, 22. Mason Mount, 21, 22. Kovacic, 27. Jorginho, 28. N'Golo Kante, 29. Christian Pulisic, 22, fair enough. Hakim Ziyech, 28. Giroud, 34, 33, 34. Yeah. So there is experience in that team.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you is when that team lines out, like if you look at that team lining out tonight, Ziyech came from the bench. So if you look at your whole front line there tonight, you had who was it? It was Tammy Abraham.
Kai Havertz, Pulisic, Hudson-Odoi, Kovacic, Mason Mount, Ben Chilwell, Thiago Silva, Antonio Rudiger.
But if you think of it, a lot of those boys, they're not going to be looking to Kovacic, or they're not going to be looking to Jorginho. Realistically, in terms of that, they may kind of look to Kante, but like really, you know what I mean? So what I'm always saying to you, and I've said it and expressed it loads of times, I'd love to see Werner playing through the middle with Giroud just off him. And I think what happens is at times when you have to kind of dig in, you even look at that goal tonight, like the not the first goal they got, but the way the second goal came off, you guys nearly had a penalty just outside the box, got a free kick. Mason just leaned back on it, put it over the bar, didn't dip enough. And then the next thing, Leicester are on the break there straight away, and boom, it's 2-0. And you're just caught on a counter there, nearly asleep, you know what I mean? But what I'm saying is, if you're Werner there on the pitch, he can call on Giroud, say, what do you think, this, that. Giroud can give him advice and say, listen, run the channel, do this, that, and the other. I'm going to win everything in the air. I'm going to knock it down to you, and I'm going to be the feeder for you. He can't get that from Pulisic, or he can't get that from Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz is still trying to fight his own battles at the moment and get himself working up to Premiership level and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So they're all standing around there on the pitch, and they're trying to figure out what should they do. And then they're looking to the sideline to Frank Lampard for inspiration, who, without a doubt, as a player, is without question. But who do they look to on the pitch? Kante is kind of out of sorts. Kovacic, they're not going to look to him. They're not going to look to Jorginho. Maybe Thiago Silva, but Thiago Silva's, he's down the back there, you know what I mean? He's not really going to influence the front line at those times.
He can only organize what his duties are. Do you know what I mean? It's like, everyone knows I'm a big ice hockey fan, right? You have 5 players, on a hockey rink. You've got your back line and you've got your front, and that's the way it is. And the back line pushes up when the forward line pushes up, but they look after each other and they make sure for counterattacks. You know what I mean? They make sure to be on lookout for counterattacks. Same transcends to all team sports, Noel. We know that. It's not rocket science. Now, with Chelsea, initially it was like, right, we started the season off slow in terms of we were still conceding goals and getting draws and whatnot, and then getting beaten by top teams. Lampard has not beaten a top team this year. And this is my problem, because he sets up negatively. So it's like he's taken, and I've heard him in interviews, oh, who influenced you most as a coach, out of all the previous managers you've had? And he goes, oh, well, I take a bit out from all of them. Yeah, but you can tell that when he plays the top teams, that the bit that he takes is from Mourinho. It's to not lose. Do you know what I mean? And that's not good enough for Chelsea Football Club when you've spent over 200 million. We were the biggest spenders this year.
Well, the funny thing about it this year, if you look at the way the league has panned out, those teams who typically play not to lose end up losing. That's
Yeah.
what's happened this year.
Yeah.
You see it even with the teams down the lower end of the division who would normally grind out, the Burnleys and Turf Moor and stuff
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
and all, and even Fulham and Craven Cottage and West Brom and all these places where they try and grind out results. They're like lambs to the slaughter because it ain't working out for them. You know what I
And
mean?
it's happening with Tottenham now, as you see. Now, all of a sudden, things aren't as rosy in the garden with Mourinho because he's not sticking to what worked for him early on.
Yeah.
You have to stick to a game plan. And in fairness, you do have to admire managers like like Klopp and like, I suppose, Pep, and even your man Bielsa. Even though Liverpool are getting hockey, or Leeds are getting hockeyed around at the moment, they're still trying to play their football. But eventually, that will come to a point where everyone in that club knows how you're meant to play. If that manager is, if the board and everybody in charge persists with that manager, how do you persist with? And I'm sure you're going to get to this question, and I don't want to be answering your questions, prematurely, but I'm at a loss really at the moment as to what I'm seeing on the pitch.
Well, I suppose looking at it with Lampard, my view on it would be, and I'm a big fan of Lampard, even as a Liverpool fan. Like,
Yeah.
you can't but not be a fan of him.
Oh well,
But
look, it's the same. Look, we're it's all banter at the end of the day. When
yeah,
we talk about Lampard and Gerrard and all these
yeah,
players, we know that these players were
yeah.
absolutely world class. Like so,
Let me put it to you this way then. With the amount of players that came in and with the changes at the club and stuff like that, okay? And I know there's a risk of not getting top four and all those kind of things. Is it a case that he should be given the time he needs to structure it the way it needs to be structured, to give those younger players the time that they need to bed in? We spoke about it last week. It is a huge change when you come even from the Bundesliga to the Premiership. It's a massive cultural change. You know what I mean? And is it a case that maybe being out of the Champions League next season potentially could that work in your favor and be a good thing in terms of
no,
trying to restructure the team and get those youth bedded in and stuff like that? Or is it a case
no,
that like if you don't make top four, is that it for Frank?
yeah, I think it's it for Frank pretty much before it gets to that question. To be honest with you, because top four in a COVID year where you've got the owner fucking forking out money left, right, and center to make sure that other people's jobs are safe. And he's doing a fantastic job, by the way, Abramovich. And I said that, like, he doesn't get enough credit in the British media for that. You know what I mean? And it's purely because of his nationality, and it's all political. But we've said that before on this particular show here that he should be getting the credit that he deserves with what he's doing for all the frontline staff and all that. Um, and I'm not segueing here too out of line. It's basically to do, like, Lampard can go. I'm just after getting a. I'm gonna open this while we're reading it. Lampard pulls no punches when talking about the team. I can't wait to hear what he says because at the end of the day, all I ever hear is we must improve, we must do this, we must do that. But the players need to know what they were doing. All right, I'm gonna read quotes here. This is from the Chelsea app, right? Live right here.
Yep.
Okay. So we were beaten by the better team. They were sharper than us, they ran more than us, and they showed real moments of quality. They looked like a team in form. We looked like a team out of form. The first goal was disappointing to get beaten from a set piece. The second goal was a really poor defending from us. From there, it was really difficult to come back from 2 down. Now, by the way, history has shown that when Rudiger is in a back two, yes, we tend to concede goals. But yeah, he played Rudiger today. I'm just going to add that. There were a lot of moments where our sharpness wasn't there, and you have to dig in, run, cover ground, and work hard to get back to those levels. Too many of our players didn't do the basics of the game well enough tonight. He was then asked whether he would look to change the system following tonight's loss with one eye on the weekend, the FA Cup. We will see who plays at the weekend, but we're not talking about wholesale changes to the system or anything like that. So he's talking about system. There is no system, Frank. That is the real problem. You are the problem, my friend. If you can't get that out of your players, then you are obviously not a good manager. If a manager can't roil his players up to play for that club badge and they're not fit enough or they're not, sharp enough, then whose fault is that? Does that mean then that right, let's take Lampard out of the equation for a second then, right? Are you saying then that the players aren't good enough and just, aren't with it? Well, if that's the case, then you need to drop those players and make sure they're playing in with the reserves then and not playing Premier League football. Or you need to make sure that your coaches have to be fired in that case and you need to get better coaches in. Or else the book stops with you. So it's one of those three things, Noel, to be honest with you. There is no excuses at that level.
Well, listening to those quotes from his interview, they don't kind of make any sense in terms of
None.
running and work rate and stuff like that. Because you guys, I think, had 66% possession tonight.
Yeah, we did.
So that means you were working hard, you were running,
absolutely,
you were hanging on to the ball,
they maintain possession,
and they maintain possession. So that doesn't concur with his analysis in the initial part of that interview or quotes there.
No.
Here's something to throw at you. Okay.
Yeah, please do.
Do we believe that all those players that came in, that they're all Frank Lampard signings, or do we think that it was Abramovich flexing his financial muscle in terms of reacting to the ban that was there and bringing in a number of trophy names that a lot of big clubs were interested in and just showing that here's the muscle of Chelsea and bring them in? Do you believe that? Are they all Lampard signings? Did he want all
I believe so. I believe so, and I'll tell you why. Because obviously Petr Cech was hired this year to work closely with Lampard and with Granovskaya to work on what players, are to be brought in for the future. And I would not take that argument this time. If that's an argument that the British media are going to use, then they're obviously defending the boy because he's English and he's an English legend. What team wouldn't want Timo Werner, the top scorer in the Bundesliga? What team wouldn't want one of the brightest future prospects in world football in Kai Havertz? What team wouldn't want Hakim Ziyech, who destroyed Chelsea last year at Stamford Bridge? That's not a good enough, because if you tell me that, oh no, if Frank Lampard came out and said, no, I didn't want Kai Havertz, I wanted Declan Rice, then I would say, get the fuck out of my club now. Well, because that would show me that you literally want to just suffice your boy in Mason Mount. You know what I mean?
But what I mean is it's not in terms of, when you mentioned there, like Petr Cech was brought in to work with the director of football in terms of bringing in talent for the future.
No, Lampard said he wanted Timo Werner and Kai Havertz in particular, and he wanted Ben Chilwell, and they got Ben Chilwell for 70 million.
Yeah, like if you think the top 10 teams in Europe, the top 10 teams in Europe would want any of those players. There's no doubt about it. They were in demand, and like you guys didn't just sail in and sign them. They signed for you because obviously there was financial clout there as well, and they wanted to go to Chelsea. But
and Lampard called them all individually, as they've all said. As you called them.
As you said it already, Liverpool wanted Werner. Like there's no secret about that. Make no mistake about it. But where I'm coming from with it is, as you said, like Cech and the director of football, they bought in these players, these young players. I'd stress young players as well for the future. But the future,
we forget that, don't we?
But the future's only 7 months old at this stage. We're only 6-7 months into the season. You know what I mean?
Like, I agree with you there, and I hear exactly what you're saying there, and I do, implore people to remember that no matter what their team is, don't start giving up on your players just because they're not performing right now. But at the end of the day, the book does stop with the manager these days, Noel.
Oh, no,
do you know what I mean?
Well, you see, as I say to people all the time, players don't get sacked, managers do.
Exactly.
What I mean?
Like if we're halfway through the season now and I'm looking at that Chelsea team that does not have a system, That's a worrying. That's a worrying sign.
Well, I suppose the problem that you have at the moment as well is there isn't a queue of managers out there at the moment available as well that you would want. I mean, there's a couple of managers out there that are available, but you wouldn't want them at Chelsea. Let's be honest about it. So the thing about it is, where are you going to find a manager who's going to care as much about Chelsea as Frank Lampard does?
But okay, right, caring about Chelsea, that's all great stuff. I love that, and I love that about Lampard. But I'm not seeing that on the pitch. I'm not seeing that on the pitch. This is a results-driven business. Like I've read, and I'm not going to quote anybody because we're on YouTube. In fairness, and a lot of these guys have their own YouTube channels and stuff like. So I'm not going to disrespect them, but a lot of well-respected um, Chelsea, YouTubers and tweeters, if we want to say, um, have basically said the same thing. Like, look, I don't want to call for the head of Frank Lampard, but also at the same time, I don't want to see my club lose anymore.
Yeah.
You know, this reminds me at the moment. This is getting to a Mourinho season after the year he won the league when he got the boot after the West Brom game, and
Well, see,
for different reasons, obviously.
yeah, my concern would be about it being a results-driven business, and we know it is a results-driven business. But if that's the case, United could have easily sacked Solskjaer, and yet they rise to the top of the league on a decent run. And we know that they
But at
have
least they actually play some form of football, though. Do you know they do? Like Chelsea don't play any form of football at the moment.
But then, history repeats itself. I mean, how close were United to sacking Alex Ferguson back in the day? And I know it's a different game now these days and stuff like that. But also look at the time it took Klopp to sort out Liverpool and sort out the issues there. Now, I know it's a different situation where he had to get rid of a lot of players and he had to bring players in and put his stamp on the team, and it took time, and you know what I mean? But like, I just don't know. A lot of
What about this? What about this stat? What about this stat? Right, Chelsea have had X amount of managers, right, in a certain period of time, and how many trophies did they have over that period of time? It worked. Do you know what I mean? Chelsea is a trophy winning team in the modern era. People that want to talk about their history and all, and I'm not throwing a jab at you because I know that's just a Liverpool Chelsea thing because it's banter. But Chelsea over the last 20 years, over the last 15 to 20 years, Chelsea are up there. The second, I think they're actually the most successful team in terms of per trophy. You know, so this is this is a trophy winning club. And what I'm saying to you is, even when Klopp came in there was still a style of football that he was trying to implement. There is no style of football that I can see in this Chelsea team now from a manager that has only added 4 players, by the way, 4 key players that are coming into this, and 4 good players as well. Chilwell has fixed his left back issue. Um, He's brought Mendy in to fix the goalkeeper issue. I don't think Mendy's good enough anyway. We're starting to see the flaws in Mendy now. I think we all, including myself, jumped on that bandwagon too quick. He's still better than Kepa, but not a world class goalkeeper, but a good goalkeeper. Um, for a manager that was so hell bent on playing the young lads last year, I mean, like I say, justify why Billy Gilmore wasn't playing tonight ahead of Kovacic. I'll tell you why, because it's a manager scared to play a young lad, even though he was shouting youth, youth, youth last year.
Well, see,
Um,
I can sort of understand it, and I'm not a Kovacic fan, and Billy Gilmore's a heck of a talent. But you know where I can understand it? Because there's so much youth on the pitch already. And
okay, but why not? If things aren't working for you, then why not try something different?
you mean,
Doing
do you
thing,
mean,
doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of insanity.
yeah,
And I've done a more of a cheap version of the
yeah,
original quote,
yeah.
but it is like Tammy Abraham. I'm sorry, he didn't reach 20 goals last year. People thought he was because he was like top scorer by January, and then what happened? He faded and faded and faded, and then they had to call upon Olivier Giroud, which is going to be the same thing this year. Lampard will come in and go, I'm sorry I've disrespected you by not really playing you over the last few games, but will you come in and save my job?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Giroud's the type of guy that will just come in and do it with a smile on his face.
Yeah, he's a proper pro. He's a proper pro.
Uh,
Um,
I'm very disheartened. I have to say, Noel, about it because I don't know. Like I said, I'm caught between a rock and a hard place because I don't want to call for the head of Lampard because, like I said, he's one of my favorite players ever, and I think
well,
he has the potential to be a good manager. But now I'm starting to question: is it too much too soon?
well, here's another one for you. Okay, is it a case that because of all the signings that came in, there was huge excitement in the Chelsea fan base? I mean, I remember at the start of the season there was pundits out there talking about Chelsea being, in the mix for the title this year and all with the signings that they made and stuff like that, which is kind of like it's a little bit naive in terms of like, I mean, you have to let these players, I go back to it again and again and again. And we see it even with the best players in the world
Yeah,
that come in. You look at Edson Cavani, who's come into Man United, and he even takes time to bed in. At times he looks very ordinary. And that's a man who's played everywhere, has had success everywhere, has all the experience in the world. It still
yeah.
takes time to adjust to that league. So is it a case that the expectation within the fan base was a bit naive in terms of, obviously Chelsea as a club always want to be competing. There's no doubt about that. But again, I harp back to trying to fit players in, trying to bed in youth, try to give youth a chance while still trying to remain loyal to the youth that got him to the dance last season, got the fourth. You know what I mean? I mean, there could be an argument there to say that Tammy Abraham is nothing more than a championship striker. He's not a Premiership level striker. There's an argument there for that. But the other argument is he,
Or a like a maybe a mid to lower tier level Premier League striker. Yeah, I'd
yeah.
agree with that. Yeah,
So I'm just wondering, all these things always tend to be reactory, they're like, and I like to look at it, like a different way. I don't always like people to pull the trigger on managers. And I remember when Klopp came in first to Liverpool as well. And I remember celebrating in front of the Cop when they got, I think, a draw against West Brom and all that kind of thing. People were going, is this lad nuts or what? What's the story? We drew against West Brom. We're celebrating it like we won a cup or something like that. You know what I mean? And like there was uproar within the fan base, but like after a while, you could see what he was trying to do. You could see he was trying to change, you know, the culture that had set into the club.
the culture exactly.
Yeah, and he had tried to bring back that culture of a winning mentality and all that type of stuff. And I really think with Frank, and I'm going to put it out there now, and most people will probably cut the head off me over it. I think he needs to be given time. I think he needs time to bed those players in to figure out what he needs to do. And I know it's frustrating. Look, I'm a Liverpool fan. I'm more frustrated than any Chelsea fan at the moment in terms of, you know, we're shocking at times at the moment. You know what I mean?
Well, put it this way. Let me go back to answer your question that you had within that. And in fairness, I agree with everything that you said, but you did have a question within that, which was, did we expect too much too soon? Right. Forget about competing with competing for championships and competing for the Premier League title. However, we should be closer to that top. Now we're out of the top four dance at the moment. At this moment of time, that's not good enough. That would have been the minimum expectation. If people thought last year subliminally that Abramovich thought that top four was minimum expectation without having the players that they signed, and then you're putting these players on the bench for a Chelsea youth lad who, like you said, is possibly no better than a championship level striker or a lower tier Premier League striker, mid to low level tier Premier League striker, and you're putting your star striker signing on the bench and just letting his confidence drift even lower. Dude, there's so many caveats to this argument. You know, how much time do you give a man that is going to ruin your potentially, hypothetically, and potentially ruin like what you're trying to build here just because he's a club legend? Like Dalglish was sacked from Liverpool. Don't forget. Kenny Dalglish, possibly you're talking about one of the greatest of all time. And it's the same with Lampard, one of the greatest, probably, arguably, there is an argument to be made that Lampard is the greatest goal scorer and midfielder of all time. There's an argument to be made there. And there's a fine line in terms of how you come back from that argument. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a manager who does look at times like, I feel sorry for Lampard when I look at him on the sideline now, because at times he does look like he's going to cry and looks lost. And I'm half thinking, like, do we need to take this guy out for his own benefit? It's like watching a UFC fighter getting the bejesus bit out of him time after time. And it's like that conversation Joe Rogan had to have with Brendan Schaub. Say, you need to give it up on live podcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it a case that Lampard needs to go back to basics? And like, I mean, this is a conversation I would like to have if he is let go. I would like that conversation to be had. And look, I think with Lampard, that would be the case. I don't think even if Lampard was let go, he would suddenly hate the club. I think, listen, you need to go down to a lower tier team again. Maybe this was too much too soon because, there's no bigger star in that dressing room than Frank Lampard. But at this, or the rumor that we did hear during the week that Avram Grant might come in. You heard that rumor that people were talking about. Now, I understand when I heard the actual proper information on what this was that they'd bring someone like Avram Grant in and his team as experienced coaches to help Lampard, not necessarily to replace him. I can't see anything that Avram Grant ever done that makes him a good coach because he's a fucking hack. Other than the fact that he's just one of Abramovich's Israel mates. He's a shite manager. He brought in Tal Ben-Aim, who was a shite footballer. And it was just that Israel wanted their name on the map for footballers. But I'm sorry to tell you, Israel, you have no great footballers. It's simple. And you have no great coaches. Gus Hiddink, if you wanted to bring someone like Gus Hiddink in to work alongside Lampard and help him pass his knowledge down to Lamps on the side, I'd have no problem with that because you know that they're not going to sack Lamps for Gus. But you bring someone like Gus in to say, right, I'm going to work with you as an assistant coach. Do you know what I mean? A second assistant coach alongside Jody Morris, just to help out with training, with tactics, with stuff like, let him kind of oversee what you're trying to do. But then again, I suppose you're probably going to answer. I know I can see by your face there because you're probably going to go, well, that's going to undermine the manager too, right?
No, what I'm thinking there is, like, it all sounds well, but I think the English press would have a field day with that. And they'd undermine it at every level. What they're going to do. They're going to go in and, when Lampard is doing press conferences, they're going to turn around and say, like, we don't want to speak to the coach. We actually want to speak to the manager, Gus Hiddink, or whoever it is. They're going to undermine him. They're going to, it'll end up worse. Like, we had that before. We did that at Liverpool with Houllier and Roy Evans. It was an absolute disaster.
Yeah, I remember Celtic done it years ago, didn't they? They done that with John Barnes when he was the Celtic manager, and then Kenny Dalglish was his advisor, but they didn't know who was the real manager. Yeah.
Well, the thing about it is, it's all well and good when things are going well and you're getting results, but when it goes bad, who's actually responsible? Who points the finger at who?
Yeah, it's true.
I just don't know. I think so.
If you're asking, I know you want to ask the serious question because we have to wind down now, but ask me the serious question that you want to ask, and I know I'm ready for it.
Well, is he in or is he out? Are you with him? Are you going to persevere, or what are you going to do?
Personally, I will never say Lampard is out, but I'm at that point now where I'm looking at alternatives if I'm the Chelsea board. Yeah.
And do you believe if an alternative comes in that naturally you'll get that little couple of weeks of a bump or whatever it is that normally happens when there's a change. But if someone different comes in, are they not going to face the same issues of the balance of youth with experience? I suppose the one thing that someone new who'll come in, he'll put Werner straight up the middle.
Well, no, because I think you're not dealing with players like when old coaches used to come in, you were talking about players that were like Drogba's age, who were like 32, 33, and Elka 33, 34. These were older players that we're not having the same conversation that we were having back in 2012. Do you know what I mean? They were older players and an older squad, and the problem was that there was no youth coming in. There was no younger players coming through, fighting for that place. Now you want a coach that can actually mold this youth into something for the future. All the while, like at a bare minimum, getting a top four finish. That should be the least amount that we should ask. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, and I mean,
But I suppose you got to remember, with the way the league has gone, we're nearly halfway through or whatever it is, you know. But with the way the league has gone, like if you go on a run of 3 or 4 games, you're right back in the mix. This is the way it's happened all season.
but
Like,
I can't see that happening under this current regime. That's the problem.
yeah,
I can't.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely a big task for him, and he needs to figure out what his starting 11 is, and he needs to come up with some sort of a plan that says this is how we're going to play, and we're going to stick to it. We're going to bed it in. We're going to hammer the home with these players. We're going to work on these players, younger players, from a mental point of view. Because, I mean, mentally, they must be struggling. I mean, Kai Havertz and Timo Werner, they used to be superstars in the Bundesliga. Revered.
Well, like how do you justify, if you're a world class manager, dropping Timo Werner tonight? Should have started through the middle ahead of Abraham. He should have. So it's all well and good playing him against Luton at the weekend now and going, "I'll get your confidence up there and get a tap in against like a mediocre championship side."
Yeah.
That's not what Werner needs.
Because those Abraham decisions could cost him his job big time.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so. And his lack of Giroud decisions ahead of Abraham could cost him his job big time. Because if you are going to drop Werner, then it should be Giroud. Abraham should be nothing than a third choice, to be honest with you, at the moment.
Yeah.
But again, it's loyalty to. I think his loyalty to certain players could cost him his job.
Yeah. So for
I
you,
think that's really.
So for you at the moment, you're not Lampard out, but you are looking around.
Yeah. I mean, I think we missed a step in letting Pochettino get to PSG, because I think if Pochettino knew that Chelsea job was a real thing, I think he would have taken that tomorrow ahead of PSG. We both know that, because he'd look at that, the young players that are in that team, and he would be salivating at that. Who else have you got? I mean, Nagelsmann, he's obviously worked. He's a German manager, and he's a very, very good coach. I think to be honest with you, if Lampard was sacked tomorrow and I had no choice over it, he would be my pick. Him or Brendan Rodgers would be my two picks.
I wonder, would there be a case for Crowbar and Hasselhout out of Southampton?
Oh, I think Hassan. I think he would take the job tomorrow.
I think he'd do really well there, because he'd have that kind of repertoire as well with the younger players and stuff like that.
And he's a young manager, but not too young. Like, he's only 46 or 47.
Yeah.
I think he would see a system there.
Yeah.
I think the way Southampton play their football, you can imagine that young Chelsea team play that style of football.
Yeah.
I think he would set a system in there and would play it no matter what. And if players were going to mope around about not playing, he would just go, "All right, you don't play then." Very simple. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think Lampard is actually. I think you're right. You touched on something earlier. I actually think Lampard is actually too nice for the job at the moment. I do. He doesn't want to let certain players down and wants to show certain loyalties. This isn't that kind of game. Do you know what I mean? Not when you're playing in the big leagues.
Isn't it amazing the way you say that, but yet, like, he'll throw those lads on the bench in a whim. You know what I mean? Like, if you're talking about Timo Werner there, whose confidence is kind of shot, and like as you said earlier, you're benching him. You know what I mean? You bench him in a big match, and like that's not going to do anything for his confidence. And then bringing him on is not going to.
Do you ever hear old strikers like Alan Smith and Robbie Fowler talking about, like, all strikers go through a little bit of a barren spell, but you have to play your way out of it?
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to play your way out of it when you come on as a second half sub and then you're put on the wing?
Yeah. Yeah.
As a striker.
Yeah.
So, of course, he's not going to shoot, because he thinks, right, my manager certainly doesn't believe that I have the capability. Yeah. Like, Hazelhunt actually had to come out this week and give Lampard tips on how to use Timo Werner. You saw that, didn't you? Like I'd actually find that embarrassing if I was a manager. Like you
Well,
need to build, and you know what? Hasselhoff was right. You need to build your team around Timo Werner and Kai Havertz, because as much as you like Mason Mount at the moment, Mason Mount's ceiling is here. Kai Havertz's ceiling is here. That's just the facts and the reality of it. You know, forget about the fact that they were trained in Cobham for a minute.
yeah.
And I think Jody Morris as an assistant manager, and I love Jody Morris, does nothing for these tactics at the moment.
Do you reckon? Do you reckon Jody being in there as a a coach with Frank? Do you reckon he's pushing the? Do you reckon he might be the one pushing the youth narrative?
Yep. I'm glad you asked that question. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. Yep. I see Liverpool's assistants, I see Man United's assistants, I see Arsenal's assistants even jumping up, going, like, having conversations. What I'm seeing at the moment from Frank, and it breaks my heart, by the way, people need to remember this before anyone calls me a fucking plastic fan. They can ask me bollocks on that one, because Niall, you've known me a long time, and I'm far from a plastic fan. But I see Frank at the moment just kind of standing there, going like that.
He's a
You know,
he's a lonely figure, isn't he?
very
A
much so.
lonely figure. He looks a
And you
lonely
need
figure.
your assistant to come up
Yeah.
to you and go, right, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Different alternatives, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, do you remember last year? You remember last year when things weren't going right for Chelsea? They go to the three at the back, the same system that Conte used to use. And I haven't seen that once this year. Why not try it? You know, just to get the result. You can have your system. Like, I don't subscribe to this bollocks either, that we all have to respect Leeds because they lost against some shite team from like 2 leagues below them either. Oh, you have to respect them though. No, not really, because they got made a show of by a team a couple of leagues below them. But at the same time, and I'm sure you'll agree with me here, there's a balance though. There's a style of football that you can have and that you want to implement. But at the same time, you also still have to try and get the result. You know what I mean? And Lampard doesn't know. I feel that Lampard doesn't know yet whether 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1 is his best team. Do you know what I mean? Or his best formation, should I say?
Yeah. Well, I think in order to change your system and try something different, you need to know where you're coming from to start with. And
Yeah.
because he's not assured of his starting 11, because he's not assured of the makeup of that, because of the heartstrings are pulling against youth versus experience, players slightly out of position, trying to get players to bed in, and then obviously the weight of wanting Chelsea to be successful and be there as the Chelsea manager because of history. He carries a lot more expectation within himself. You know what I mean? Like, he clearly doesn't want to fail as a Chelsea manager, and as a fan base, you don't want him to fail. You want him to succeed. Um, but yeah, interesting times ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So you asked me that question: am I Lampard in, Lampard out? I'm just going to end this particular podcast on saying I'm Lampard ? That's really how I feel. Do you know what I mean? And it sounds like I'm sitting on the fence, but I'm more, for those kind of people that want to maybe call me up on that, I'm more leaning towards the Lampard out category now, because I can't. It just, again, you know, there's no way that this team should be struggling to be in the top four. So forget about challenging for titles. There's no way this team should be struggling to be in the top four. And to me, it looks like a lack of motivation on the training pitch.
I can, I
And
can, I can, I can see it in you as a fan how it's hurting you. Trying to,
yeah,
trying to deal with that. I can't imagine what it would be like if Steven Gerrard was managing Liverpool and I wanted him out, or I think he had to go. It'd kill
yeah,
me. It'd kill me.
it's very difficult to articulate
Yeah,
basically how
yeah.
I feel, to be honest with you.
But you can see the
Um,
frustration coming through the screen. Like, you can see it in you, mate.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
Like if he was gone tomorrow, man, of course there'd be tears shed. You know what I mean? Because it'd be like that's an end of an era before it even got started. But at the same time, it's like, how long do we actually continue with this? If the board do persist with him, I will have all the respect in the world. That they're showing a bit of leniency. But at the same time, I think changes need to be made. If they keep Lampard, changes need to be made definitely within the coaching staff, and somebody needs to have a real conversation with him about tactics. Because if I'm Roman Abramovich or Marina Granovskaya, I'm like, why is our 60 million striker sitting on the bench for Tammy Abraham, who scored 7 goals this year?
Well, they see it and know it the same way as we see it and know it. I mean, it's
Exactly.
not, you know what I mean? It's like, especially if you're talking about the director of football, I mean, they've brought in Werner. They haven't brought Werner in to be a spectator.
No.
You know, they're expecting him to play at least 90% of the games, you know?
Well, that's it, because they already had a previous manager that basically, devalued the. They've already made one investment that kind of the manager and the player kind of devalued himself in Kepa. I mean, they spent 70 million on Kepa. So they don't want to be bringing in a striker that they have to try and flip next year. And all these rumors of Haaland. Oh, Lampard wants to bring in Haaland. They're like, well, what are you going to do to that guy as well then?
Play him out on the wing.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For Tammy Abraham, because quite clearly, Tammy Abraham is great and Haaland isn't. Do you know what I mean? So it's a very, it's a very difficult one.
Well, look, I appreciate you coming on. I know these are never easy, these conversations, and especially right
Yeah,
after
yeah.
those type of results. But it's good to chew the fat at times and assess, and get a different opinion and a different light on it as well. And like I know it's never easy, but look, hopefully it'll turn things around because it would sicken me even more if another manager came in and you started buzzing and you started playing well, and I'd be thinking, but that could have been Frank. You know what I mean? Like it just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense.
Do you know what? Like, as I say, it is what it is. It's just when I see, like, people always say, what's the problem with Chelsea strikers? It used to be that they couldn't get anyone to match Didier Drogba, and Didier Drogba is a different animal.
Yeah.
But when you see Timo Werner at such a young age now struggling for confidence, and your heart actually bleeds for him, knowing the capabilities that he has, you're like, that has to be management.
Yeah. Well,
It's
look,
not good enough. It's
well,
not good
look,
enough.
it's been great talking about it and appreciate you coming on. And look, we always have to have this chat at times and they're always difficult. But
Sure, look, it is what it is.
no matter what the decision that's made, for yourself, blue will always be the colour. That's the main thing.
And Frank Lampard will always be number 8 in my eyes as well.
So till next time, make sure you jump on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, smash that bell notification and everything, and let us know your ideas in the comments there. Give us your feedback. Let us know your thoughts. Always a difficult time for Chelsea fans. And we'll talk to you next time. Cheers.